Welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast with your hosts, Betsy Westhafer and Tony Bodo. Join Betsy and Tony as they dive in with highly successful C-suite leaders who have grown successful organizations by creating a laser focus on listening to their customers and building deep customer relationships. Now, it's time to join Betsy and Tony for the Really Know Your Customer show.
Welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast. I'm Tony Bodo, CEO of Tony Bodo International.
And I'm Betsy Westhafer, CEO of the Congruity Group. We're so excited for this conversation today. Thanks for joining us.
I'm really excited to talk to Mark today, Betsy. It was such a great conversation, both in our prep and then also when we recorded the podcast. And one of the points that he brought out really toward the end of the show, but we build till we get there, is these, what he calls these small moments. And I don't think he realized it, but we talk about micro moments in our first book, Profitability. And on camera here, I'm just showing a shameless plug for the book, Profitability. We wrote this book in 2018, and we talk about these micro moments, these short 3-second, 5-second moments where you do something for a customer and it just puts your brand in their mind in a way that they're emotionally connected with it. And it really changes how they see the world, how they see your brand, how they see themselves. You know, and that may seem like, wow, how do you do that? Well, he talks about how the airlines do it and just gives some very basic examples. And so, as I said, it's toward the end of the show, but when you talked about that, I was like, yes, this is what a lot of people just don't understand in how to build not just a loyalty program, which we're going to talk extensively about, but how to build loyalty, because you can't have loyalty. You can have a loyalty program without having loyalty first. It's not just about the perks and the benefits. I want to be with that brand. I want to use that brand. I want to go back again and again. So this is not just about airlines. It goes much broader than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark Ross Smith is the CEO of Status Match, which is a fascinating model for the airline industry. It would be best to let him explain it, which he does at the front end of the interview. And I love talking to entrepreneurs like him because he experienced a problem that people weren't really talking about it being a problem. And he was like, there's a solution to this. And fast forward, he's spent a lot of years learning how to solve the problem before he actually started solving the problem. And he talks about how he did that. But I just think this is such a fascinating conversation. And we were talking off camera about, I live in Dayton, Ohio, and it's such an aviation town because of the legacy of the Wright brothers. And so this particular interview has just been really fascinating to me, learning so much about the challenges and the business model of the airlines that you don't actually hear about in the news. You know, they talk about a lot of things. And as he points out, the CEOs are talking about things that really that conversation should be shifting, and he anticipates that the conversation will shift. So I just think it's a great conversation that our audience is really going to embrace, because more than likely everybody that's listening to this show is a flyer, and many of them probably frequent flyers. So this will be a really interesting conversation for everybody listening in. So without further ado, let's meet Mark Ross Smith from Status Match. Mark, welcome. We're so happy to have you here today.
Hey guys, fabulous to be with you.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to this conversation. As our audience knows, we do prep sessions, and we know kind of where this conversation is going to go. And it's a really unique business you have, so we're really excited to dive into it. So give us the background. Tell us about you, how you got to this point with the work you're doing now, where you're from, where you live now, all the things.
Okay, this is like 8 questions there.
Yeah, I'm just
3 hours on this podcast.
Power load the front end of the question.
Australian originally, now living in Malaysia, in Southeast Asia, and I kind of got into this industry deliberately. My previous business in Australia had a social network. It was in the telco industry, and as part of having a cool, funky social network, I was flying around the world, conferences, events, speaking, just basically being a frequent flyer, right? And that was a lot of fun. And, when you work your way up the food chain in an airline to get gold, platinum, diamond, those kind of status levels, you start meeting people at airlines. Funny enough, they want to get to know you. They want to know, how they can improve the experience for you, and they can do more for you because they want you to spend more money. Funny that. So when I met a lot of people that are really interesting, got a bit of insight into how the airline game worked. And I'd sold that business in Australia, and I moved to Hong Kong after that. And when I moved there, I couldn't fly Qantas, the Australian airline, so much because I'm different country. I'm moving, legitimate reason, And so I spoke to Cathay Pacific there, and I said, the major airline in Hong Kong, and I said, can you give me what's called a status match, right? So I said, look, I'm really high level with one airline over here. I want to start flying you guys. You just give me the same with you for free right now, and I'll start flying with you. Because, I fly a lot. I like flying. Clearly, I'm going back to Australia a lot because I've got family there, right? So I'm a good customer, right? Why wouldn't you want me to spend more money with you? So if you do that, I basically spend with you. If you don't, I don't spend money with you. So, take your pick. And they said no. So that was an awkward conversation.
Yeah, excuse me for interrupting, but did you just think that was such a no-brainer that they'd say, of course, absolutely?
Well, so in my mind, I'm spending 50, 60, 70,000 bucks a year in, business class travel. I thought, I'm a customer that you want, right? And now that having worked in the airline industry, that is a customer airlines should want. And I thought, why wouldn't you want my business? It cost you in theory nothing to get that. Just give me the diamond status, right? There's a brick wall I sort of ran into there. And so I spoke to another airline, Singapore Airlines in the region, and I tried with them. They said no. I spoke to another airline in Taiwan, China Airlines. They said no. I thought, what? This is odd. Why do airlines not want my business? Right? Because you see them, they spend a lot of money on marketing, branding, advertising. You see things, all the emails all the time, fly from LA to Phoenix for only $59. You see all these, they spend a lot of money on this stuff trying to acquire a business. And yet here I am basically walking the door putting my hand up saying, hey, I proved my ability to spend some decent cash in the industry. Do something, give me this status, right? I thought it's just weird. So what I figured out is airlines are really good at getting, the average, what I'll call average, once, maybe twice a year flyer to fly. They're pretty good at that. But as you work your way up, there's a gap in the middle. And so the people that have like a silver or gold type level with an airline, they're not too good at getting these people on board. The ultra top end, like corporate, government, kind of big contract clients, they're pretty good at that. But sort of in the what I'll call the middle, the meat of the sort of a member base of an airline, which to be fair is actually represents 30 to 40% of all the ticket revenue, right? So it's actually a pretty big base you want to look after. They're just not that great at it, at acquiring them, I will say. And so that's sort of where all this sort of started is I thought, I've got to create a process. I've got to, I've been a customer of an airline, so I understand that part. And now I need to create this for the users, basically represent my fellow human frequent flyers out there, try and solve that problem. And so I started, so this is back in 2013, 2014. I started trying to create Status Match back then and didn't really work. I didn't really understand it enough. And so what I did from there is I thought, I just sold my business in Australia, effectively unemployed now, had a bit of money. So I thought, there's no university to learn this stuff, right? You can't go to university and learn how to do airline loyalty. It doesn't exist. And so I just went to every conference possible, just paid my way in there, had nothing to sell. I'm just there to learn. And I realized pretty quickly, I could grasp a lot of what they were doing because being a real customer of the product, and sort of went from there. And then long story short, ended up, using that knowledge, getting the real experience, working for actually ran loyalty at an airline, and then sort of left there and then sort of picked this up again. And it's doing pretty well now.
So tell us a little bit about how the business operates, and we know the problem you're solving, but how do you go about that?
So we do two things. We obviously outreach to frequent flyers. We say, hey, if you're moving cities, changing jobs, just like I was, hey, just come sign up. It's free. punch in your details. If something comes up, we'll let you know. There's a bit of that. And then there's a bit of also our proactive outreach, talking to major global airlines and hotels and saying, look, this is problem out there. You're not that great at acquiring customers. Let us just do it for you. Right? It doesn't cost you anything. It's totally free. We'll put people through a process. We validate stuff. We just take all the legwork out of it, all the logistics behind it that airlines are just not set up to do. Right? Airlines are pretty good at flying metal tubes through the sky. They're pretty good at feeding you in the air. They're okay at cleaning stuff. They're not good at acquiring new gold members. So that's where we come in, and sort of a bolt on to their business. So just let them focus on what they're good at.
So then what's the business model for Status Match?
So we charge the end customer. So when you apply as a customer, we charge you a fee anywhere between $49 and $99 to apply. And that's actually really good because it kind of gets rid of the tire kickers, people that expect it for free. And, when there's a whole psyche around when you pay for something, you're more likely to value it and then use it, which is really important for the airline. Because if they go giving you elite status, a gold status, for example, they want you to use it. They want you to, the deal is, I give you some of this over here and you give me some of that hard-earned money and fly with us, right? And so if you paid a fee, a nominal amount over here on the, $50, for example, the chances of you flying are astronomically higher than if you had got it for free. Because if you get it for free, you just kind of put it in your back pocket and think, well, one day when that airline's brand come out, I might fly them. But if you paid for it, you're like, well, I'll show them. I'll spend even more money with them. As it kind of locks you in. Sort of like, Amazon Prime, I guess, you're paying a bit of subscription. Where are you going to buy things from?
Yeah, exactly.
So you brought up a statistic, which I don't think I've heard before. The 30 to 40% ticket revenue comes from this middle ground, if you will, right? What is it that really drives airline revenue? We talked about this a little bit, but let's really dive in deeper to why should they want to go after those status customers beyond just the ticket revenue? You talked about credit cards. You talked about some of the other ways that these airlines really are making their money. I don't think a lot of people know that. I mean, I've worked in the hospitality industry for years, and I was not aware at the level that airlines are really running into challenges with flying and making money that way. So the alternatives have got to focus on.
Yeah, I think there's two major parts to airline revenue. One is selling seats for cash, right? Just getting people to fly. And there's the whole ancillary revenue on that, charging for bags, seat selection, that kind of stuff. And then there's this other part, loyalty, right? And in the last, since sort of pandemic started, a bunch of the big airlines obviously needed cash pretty quickly. And how do you raise cash? You go to the government, beg for money, basically. But the government, they're a bit smarter this time. They said, well, you've got to secure these. These are loans. You've got to pay them back. You've got to secure it somehow. And they secured it with their loyalty programs because they'd already mortgaged aircraft, gate slots, all this kind of, basically everything else mortgaged to the hills. So they needed something else. And they go, oh, we've got this loyalty program thing. And if you read through some of the SEC filings for the US carriers, the loyalty program's worth more than the airline. Not just by a little bit, by a factor of 2 to 3 times. So what it meant is in a high pandemic, you got, for example, in American United Delta, the market cap of the airline was somewhere between $8 to $15 billion. And the loyalty programs, all of them worth north of 20 billion, right? And so just this tiny part of the airline was worth double, 3 times what the entire group is worth, right? So what effectively means is airline's worthless. The loyalty programs are all the value is, right? And this is because it's the type of revenue that's generated, right? So in a loyalty program, which is most of the revenue comes from banks, right? So you got your credit card, you spend, you earn like 1 mile per dollar kind of thing, right? In the background is a lot of money changing hands. Effectively, the bank is paying the airline for those miles. They put miles in your account, you redeem your miles free flight. So you get a free flight, but the bank's making money every time you swipe your card to buy something, right? And they make a lot. They make many, many billions of dollars from that, and it's high margin revenue, right? There's a report out recently. I saw American Airlines published. I think it was 73% gross margin they have on those points. I think it's 52% net. So there's a bit of margin, and it's not like there's low volume. They're selling billions, if not trillions, of these miles every year, right? So they're making a lot, and because it's high margin revenue, and they don't have planes and fuels and pilots and all this high capex stuff that airlines have, because it's a loyalty program, right? It's effectively a marketing company, right? Which is valued differently in the market than an airline, right? An airline is kind of trades like a bad auto company, 4 to 5 times profit earnings ratio, whereas a tech company is, it's not 20, 30 times is not unheard of. It's pretty normal. So therefore, that's how you get these huge valuations on the loyalty program. And so, I talk about, if your loyalty program is worth so much, it's generating all this high margin revenue. Why wouldn't let's put a customer experience hat on for a second. Why wouldn't you focus more on this loyalty stuff? Why invest crazy money in making the seat recline an extra 3 degrees, or what? Why go to that effort when what's the payoff, right? Nominal. Whereas if you put a little bit of money into loyalty to grow the revenue by an extra 2 or 3%, that's going to translate to 30 times more on the back end in value, which you can use to borrow more to invest in the airline to have a better product. And this whole sort of cycle that sort of flows around, where leading with loyalty, customer experience, there's a Venn diagram there somewhere, they overlap. Lead with that, and the airline kind of follows along.
It's funny thinking about that. I've been flying a lot recently, and I had the ability to tie my Lyft, and I think it was just Lyft. I don't know about Uber, but my Lyft app into my airline loyalty program. So every time I take Lyft, I get points on my airline loyalty, which would not cost them anything. So these partnerships, I think, would be a good thing as well. The other piece of it is I get double those miles when the Lyft is taking me to and from the airport. So it's, I just think there's so much room for creativity that would not cost them a lot of money to do that. And it got my attention.
And now using Lyft more than you otherwise would do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's making me loyal to both. It's a Delta perk, and I don't know if the other airlines do it or not, but just the whole loyalty thing can be so much bigger, I think, than just what most people, I think, what the perception in the market is about a loyalty program. I'm fascinated with what you just said about just the margins on it and how it's so much more valuable.
It's a bit of a case of, with like Lyft and Delta, it's like 1 + 1 = 3 kind of, to a certain degree. You get two big brands, people know them both. When you pull them together, it's like, wow, this is kind of cool. I have to do it, right?
Yeah, and I didn't realize until just this last trip that I was getting double miles when the trip is to and from the airport, because they have that information on the app, on the Lyft app. And I didn't realize I was getting double. So that was kind of a feel good customer experience thing. I'm like, oh, look at that. I got twice as many points just because I used Lyft to go to the airport.
And so now you're going to think twice about flying a different airline because I need my double points, right?
Right. So, yeah, exactly. It sets the bar.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because if we start looking at how they're connecting the dots in these different loyalty programs, like, I got a credit card recently from an airlines, and I use it all the time and pay it off and use it again because I want my miles. But, as I'm thinking about that, all of this data is flowing through. They should be able to really know their customer because they've got so much data, but yet you're telling us that they struggle to really acquire them. The loyal customers, at least. So I'm curious, like, what is it that they really need to learn, or what is it that they could do to really make a difference?
Some airlines may be slightly complacent to a degree. We're a big airline. People will just fly. They've got no choice. If you want to go from here to here, have fun flying in 3 stops on another airline, little bit of that, I think. So there's there's the acquisition part, like getting people to start flying your airline. And traditionally it's been outsourced to like sales teams, right? Not like loyalty customer acquisition teams, right? And then I guess the other part is like we'll call a retention piece, right? Keeping people loyal with your airline. So basically not flying other airlines. And this is one of the top, like what I call one of the golden metrics that airline loyalty programs have. It's called share of wallet or share of spend. So this is how much you're flying this airline versus everyone else. And this is a really important metric because it can be, we can all have different numbers, but all be ultra loyal at the same time, right? So you go imagine if, Tony, you're flying twice a year, right? You only fly twice a year. It's one's to visit grandma and one's to visit your cousin, whatever, right? So that's 100% of your air travel, right? So if an airline knows they're getting 100%, happy days, right? Whereas, Betsy over here has got 200 flights a year, right? Spending a lot of money, first class all around the world, everywhere. 100 of those flights are with, making up, Delta, So in Delta's eyes, you're like a what would be a diamond member, a top tier member, really valuable, great customer, yeah, really loyal. But actually, you've got another 100 flights with American Airlines over here. So actually, you're not loyal. 50% share of wallet, right? So what that means is for an airline, what they would do is target Betsy with more promotions because the ability to grow that revenue, that share of wallet exists. Whereas Tony, already getting everything they can out of you, right? So really it's about sort of on one hand, stretching it to try and get more out of someone, or better yet, maybe it's, hey, you fly a couple of times a year, now get the credit card. Now here's some ways you can earn some extra miles on the ground, hotel partners, all this kind of stuff. So it's about expanding the revenue and the sort of engagement laterally through non-air at that point. But if they're not getting 100% share of wallet from you, there's a big opportunity to capture more of that, right? And hence, this is so where loyalty programs are designed intentionally to have tiers in the program, so you want to reach that next tier up. This is also why airlines introduce new tiers, like really high tiers, because you've got people that already have the highest tier. They start splitting business off to another airline. And so for airlines to bring that back, one way to do is create a new tier. So people stop spending over here, bring it all so that they sort of aggregate it with one airline. And then you get this new status. And that's why a lot of airlines have 5 or 6 different tiers, because they keep adding them on top of it to solve this problem that is never going to end, of trying to get people to be more loyal in the what we call the retention side of things, right? Keeping people spending and on that sort of train of just earning status every year, keep earning the miles.
I want to go back a little bit to the beginning of the conversation when you said you were calling all these different airlines and they were just saying no. Did they give you any rationalization for why they were saying no, or was it back to just complacency and it's not what the script says? Or why do you think that is, that you were just getting a brick wall there?
So to be fair, a lot of airlines just don't have a process in place. There's no policy, there's no official way to do stuff, and it's generally been, if you know the CEO, you have golf with him on the Saturday, and hey, by the way, buddy, I need gold status. The kind of conversation. I'll buy you drinks if you do it for me. There's been a bit of that, and on top of that, you got corporate sales teams at airlines and hotels going out there schmoozing people, doing dinners, drinks, and hey, I'll give you gold status. So there's a bit of that. On top of that, there's the perception of like one airline said, oh, well, our top customers spend, at least $50,000 a year with us, and we can't just give it to you for free because you haven't spent that with us. I'm like, well, hang on, you're not going to get it unless you give it to me. So, but chicken and egg here, which I got a lot of airlines I can fly, but there's not that many of me out there. So, take your pick. So I didn't end up giving this one particular airline my business. Long story short, I ended up meeting a girl there, marrying her. She worked at the airline. I ended up getting staff travel. So not only did they lose out my revenue, they actually might cost them some money, because suddenly I'm flying on, staff flights everywhere where I could have been on paid revenue tickets. So lesson learned, hey?
So when you're talking to them now, are you starting to see them understanding what you're doing? I mean, are they starting to embrace status match and understanding why this is so good for them?
Yeah, totally. We've we're signing up sort of an airline a month kind of thing. The run rate right now. Traditionally, the sales cycle with airlines is ridiculously long, like many years. So definitely a lot of interest for different reasons. Some are very strategic. Some that are just realize that, hey, we're just not that great at it. You guys are experts. Just handle it for us. A lot of that. It's about education as well, helping them put policies, procedures in place internally to deal with these kind of requests from customers. Because a customer emails an airline and says, hey, can you give me a status match? Which is a really common thing. If there's no process, it kind of gets a bit of a black hole. You don't reply to someone. And if someone's got like a gold status in airline, they're spending 5, 10, 15, 20, this is a good customer, right? Versus, Tony over here is doing 2 flights a year. So you want more of these people, right? It's like, if they contact you wanting something, just reply to their email. It's like not, and then you got to know what you're going to give them, put some terms around it, that kind of thing. So there's some expectation there. So, bunch of airlines that work with us, they just kind of outsource it. So if someone contacts them, they just say, look, just go to statusmatch.com. Just go through a process there. That's who we work with. It's a lot easier. They save face as well. They don't have to say no to customers, which is really, it can be awkward sometimes, especially if it's like you've hit up a C-level person in the company and say, can I ask this? And like the last thing they want to say is no, right? It's a lot easier to say, yeah, go here. They're not saying no. They are saying no. They're saying yes at the same time. So they got a way to sort of a get out of that awkward moment if they need to. It's a bit of a political thing there. We can kind of help manage some of that for airlines, but definitely becoming a lot more popular. Now we've got ways we help airlines generate revenue on the back of it as well, with other fees and stuff. So we could actually make them. We've actually got clients where we bring them new customers. The airline pays us nothing, but we actually end up paying the airline as well on top of that. So you get paid to get new customers. Who's ever heard of that? I mean, I would sign up to that.
Yeah. I'm thinking, how can we do that? Yeah. And I love that you're solving other problems for them, like saving face. I mean, that's a problem you're solving for them that, isn't maybe the primary one, but it's certainly a value add.
Exactly. You got to imagine a typical airline CEO, is meeting a lot of people, a lot of handshakes, a lot of, all around the world, governments, corporate, it's and people all the time asking for what I believe one of their most valuable assets, which is elite status. And they're asking for it genuinely for free. You know what it's like if you're in some industry, your friends know you do X and they're going to ask you for it. Hey, can you fix my computer? Hey, can you do whatever it is, right? Can you, my tap's leaking. Just take a look at it for a second, right? So with airlines, it's like, can I get some free tickets? Can I get some miles? Can I get free gold status? It's that kind of thing. And so, it's something that these, higher ups in airlines run into all the time. And so, helping them sort of through that process a bit. Yeah. Seeing some good results, very positive results from it.
I want to shift gears for a second because the airlines have done an amazing job with loyalty programs. I think they're probably, next to hotels, they're some of the best in the world at loyalty programs in general. What could other companies or other industries learn from the airlines that would really add value? I mean, I'm just thinking like any consumer-focused business, if they could generate 2 to 3 times the value or the revenue, if you will, from a loyalty program, why not go that route? So how could other companies do this?
So if we take a step back and look at why it's really successful for airlines, right? There's a lot of emotional drivers there for customers, right? So I call like an emotional pull, and that's done via the loyalty proposition. Like, for example, you're like a platinum member, they call boarding for an aircraft and they say, platinum members can now board. It feels pretty darn good waltzing past 300 other people that are still lined up, right? That moment sticks with you for about 5 seconds until you scan your boarding pass, you get on the plane, you're like, that feels really good. I want more of that, right? And it's these small moments repeating over and over and over again. So like that's one. Another one is when the cabin manager comes down, welcome back, you're one of our loyal customers, would you like a glass of something from business class, even though you're in economy class today? It's these tiny little moments, right? Small moments, very highly emotional moments, right? And what that does is starts training you in your mind. I really like this brand. I really like this brand. I really like this brand. And when this is consistently repeated over and over and over and over again, it sort of triggers these chemicals in your brain. It's the same sort of feelings like falling in love, basically, right? And so with that in mind, how can other brands effectively replicate that? Yeah. It's an emotional journey. So how do you make your customers feel really good about something? So for example, let's say you own like a retail, like a juice company or something. Like you're making juices for people, $5 a thing, kind of thing. If you notice someone's a low customer and it's like you just give them an upgraded cup, for example, right? It doesn't really cost you a bit of product. That's about it, right? If you just didn't even mention it, just say, oh, by the way, this is you might need 2 hands to hold your cup today instead of one. Things like that. Like that's one of these examples of just a small moment. No one really thinks about it. You don't make a big deal out of it. Just a friendly reminder of what's happening, and you just feel good about it, right? So do that over and over and over and over again. Putting a loyalty structure around that as well with tiers, things like having a VIP line for, your top members. That's one of those things, so you go, well, I'm going to go shop at this brand because there's a special line for me. All these high-end luxury retail brands, there's generally a couple of secret doors, right? You get like a Louis Vuitton or something, right? There's the main retail space. But if you want the real good stuff, there's a special passage somewhere and you go into that. And there's always like a super secret passage as well. So there's like 3 tiers of shopping experiences, not all stores, but a lot, right? And so, if you get into that super, super back room, you're in like the best space they have. They have products that no one else can buy. Generally you don't ask about price in that room. It's like you either can afford it or you're not invited there kind of thing. So that would be, an example of how some high-end retailers are doing it through not really a loyalty program. It kind of is in a way. If they know you, they know that you buy a lot from there and you buy the right type of stuff and you're the right type of clientele, they'll just start inviting you to these things. Just come with me and over here. Let's go away from everyone else. And some of these brands, you walk in and it's like, do you want a drink? Can I get something for you today? And it's not the answer is not I'll grab a glass of water. The answer is I'll have some champagne, right? A minute later, you got a glass of champagne. It's kind of cool. You're at a shopping mall, just buying some shoes, and so these are, admittedly, not every business can do this, but it's all about creating emotionally charged small moments and then consistently repeating them over and over and over again. That at its core is what airline loyalty does really well.
I think the consistency part of that is really important too, because like you said, just training the brain again and again and again to fall in love with that brand. So excellent.
And
thank you.
What I would add to that as well is, the brands that proactively reach out to you. For example, we have a local store that will call my husband when something they know he likes has come in and they don't have a lot of them, and like, hey, I've put a couple back for you, come on in, we'll be here, I'll pull these out for you. So just that when you have the ability to create those moments rather than to react to those moments, I think that just takes it to a whole new level, because I'm so impressed whenever we get that phone call.
This is old school personalization, right? These days all that big data, AI, also, but real personalization is really knowing your customer, those relationships, those small town type vibes, right? Where it's exactly that. You get this product in, it's like, oh, I know so and so would be interested in that. I'll give them a call. Car companies do this all the time. It's like, oh, we're getting this special model in. It's a limited edition. I mean, a lot of them have waiting lists, but it's like, oh, I might call so and so because I know he likes orange stripes on cut, whatever it is. And I'll, he hasn't spent $1 million with us this year. I'll give him a call.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, this time has flown by. This to me was such a fascinating conversation. Tony, do you have any other questions before we start wrapping up?
I mean, I think the the only question I really have is like looking at where things are going. I mean, COVID changed a lot. So where do you see status match and maybe the airline industry moving over the next couple of years here? Because I think we're just beginning to see people coming back to travel. But in a lot of the work that I've been doing lately, I've seen people's decision-making process has changed. I was talking with a cruise line actually just recently. They said they went from an 18-month booking window to literally people booking the week of or within just a few weeks to take a cruise. And so I'm just curious, like what you might be seeing for your company, but also for the airlines more broadly.
I think the business model is in the cruise line, definitely it's changing the business model of airlines. So there's at least 50 startup airlines like that are running jets in the world in the last couple of years. It's never been a better time to start an airline if you want to make/lose money. Depends how that goes. And a lot of those are coming in with no debt or less debt than some of the legacy carriers. Hence, they're in a much better financial position. So I think we're going to see, specifically airline for a second, we're going to see some business models that look and feel a little different to traditional legacy carriers and different to the traditional low cost and ultra low cost airline models. I don't know how that'll pan out yet, but some of those are obviously looking at loyalty programs and going, why are we trying to compete on price for seats when hang on all the values and loyalty? So why don't we compete on credit cards and compete on perks and benefits and lounge access and upgrades and miles and the stuff that apparently the market thinks is a lot more valuable. To be honest, I think it's a bit sexy to talk about than pilots, fuel, and planes and strikes and all sort of stuff that has been what every airline CEO has been talking about for the last, 100 years. So I think it's about time that the industry moved in a direction that is more sustainable from a business perspective, instead of sort of ups and downs in the airline business, more sustainable from a revenue economics perspective. That might be subscriptions or all sorts of stuff, right? And I think on the whole sustainability thing, I think airlines are, they're getting a lot of pressure from governments and sometimes customers to start acting in that area as well. Pretty tricky because they fly metal tubes through the air that spew out fumes everywhere. So it's a bit difficult to how do you do that, right? And there is an upside in benefit of people traveling, right? Because when you travel, you're traveling for a reason, not just to have caviar with your friend for lunch. It's like you're doing some business there, you're meeting someone. There's economic activity that makes the world work because of that as well. So I think there's a bit of a balancing act there. So I think in the next few years, I think we're going to see a bunch of new business models come out, which I think is going to be really exciting because they have to do it. But I think other industries can learn from as well, right? Airline industry is forced to innovate. We're starting to see a little bit of it, and I think we'll see a lot more of it in the coming years.
I think that'll be awesome for the consumers too. It almost has to be awesome for the consumers. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Well, Mark, it has been wonderful talking to you. I just think this is so interesting and really love the way your mind works. Just thinking about this problem that, I don't think as many people are out there thinking about it the way you are. Before we wrap up, on our show, we like to invite our guests to give a shout out to an organization, nonprofit, charity that might be doing some really good work that you would just want more people to know about. So is there anybody that you would want to tell us about?
There is. Keep you on the theme of loyalty and points. There's a really interesting product, I guess, called Do Good Points. So dogoodpoints.com. They partner with thousands of charities and nonprofit organizations. And what I like about it is you earn points when you give, right? So instead of just giving and not knowing where it's kind of going, it's you earn points from it and you can sort of choose. It's kind of almost like charity introduction. I really like this because suddenly you see new brands, new charities, you're like, you don't really think about, right? So you think really niche, really small, sort of charities that just don't get the limelight they probably deserve because they're so hyper focused on this tiny little problem. You look at it and go, hey, that's something I can really get behind. Cool, I'll donate and get rewarded for it, right? So I'm big fan of their platform, what they're trying to achieve.
And it's called dogoodpoints.com?
dogoodpoints.com, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. I have not heard of that. I can't wait to dive into that and look at it. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for joining us. This has been a great conversation. Really excited to watch what happens in the next few years with Status Match and the evolution of the industry in terms of innovation. So thank you so much for sharing all of this with us.
Betsy, what I really loved as we listened to this is early on in the episode, Mark identified something I didn't even hear the statistic when we did the prep session, but he talked about how people with status, certain, gold, silver, platinum status, he said that they make up 30 to 40% of the revenue of the airlines, but the airlines really are challenged to acquire those, to bring them from other airlines over, right? And it really, I was thinking during the show, and I was probably a little quiet at the very beginning because I was just really processing some of the things that he was saying here. But it's really about knowing your customer. I mean, it's the essence of our show. And it's like, if the airlines don't know those core customers, a very small percentage of the customers that are bringing in 30 to 40% of the revenue, they don't know them well enough to really bring them over from a competitor, then that's a big hole. And I'm, step back a minute just from the airlines and say, okay, what about other businesses? What other businesses really don't know why their customers may be using a competitor, or potential customers are using a competitor, spending more of their money over there, and how do you bring them back? And it got me thinking about the book that we wrote this year, The Rarest Advantage, because in there we talk so much about how the executives really need to have this open door conversation with their customers, with their strategic customers, whether it be B2B or B2C. You've got to have that open door where you're listening, you're asking questions, you're engaging, you're kind of living with them side by side, so you understand what's going on in their lives, what's going on in their businesses, so you can really step up and help them when they need that. And if changing statuses because you're moving, or your life has changed, whatever it may be, understanding what's going on in the person's life or business would open the door tremendously for these airlines and for a lot of other companies too.
Well, and you think about the return on investment of really knowing your customers and the opportunity. And he points it out so clearly, like you're saying, hey, I'm a really good customer. I've got proof that I've spent $50,000, $60,000 flying. Why do you not know this about me? And why do you not want to do everything you can to convert me to being your customer? Because I'm going somewhere. I'm not going to stop flying. I'm going somewhere. So why would you not work really hard to turn me into a loyal customer for you? So I think it's just such an interesting problem that he's solving for the airlines. And then, the residual, like they're taking it off the plates of the airlines, not saying, no, we're not going to do that. It's rather, oh, here's who you should talk to help you do that. And so they're solving that problem too. And it has so many ripple effects. So I just think it's really going to be fun to watch, to see where this goes. And I think it can only be good for the consumer.
And it's interesting, though, on that point you made there, they're outsourcing the solution to a problem that they have, which is making the experience better. And I would normally have, be the person saying, you don't want to outsource a strategic challenge that you have. You want to figure out how to do it internally, because that could be a way you distinguish yourself in the market and differentiate yourself and all of that. But the truth of the matter is, some of these problems just are too big to solve internally, because too much effort. And if someone's got a good solution, it might be best to outsource them. And with COVID, if we go back to the beginning when we started our show a couple of years ago, COVID was just hitting. And I think about how all the retail stores and restaurants and all these other establishments, which brick and mortar, we couldn't go into them anymore. They had to immediately outsource to delivery services, last mile type logistics. They gave up the experience of being in the restaurant, being in the retail shop, but they had to. And now, airlines are choosing to make this shift to really say, we've got a bad experience in this area. They're smart enough to say, let's hand it over to someone who's an expert in this space so they can deliver on a great experience, and we'll focus on what we're already good at.
Exactly. I think that's a perfect way to wrap, Tony. As always a pleasure to have these conversations. Love doing this show with you. Love our audience that's been loyal and listening. But if you have not yet subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. And we will continue to bring you great guests on the Really Know Your Customer podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Really Know Your Customer. We hope you gained a lot of value from being here today. If you want to learn more about the work Betsy and Tony do to help their clients thrive, visit Betsy at thecongruitygroup.com and Tony at tonybodo.com. See you next time on the Really Know Your Customer Show.